the 10th of August 2020. Business Insights is a very exciting webinar series hosted weekly on Mondays at midday by a panel of industry thought leaders and business owners who simply want to be in the know about the latest and most significant news and initiatives in the Australian business landscape that impact how they do business. Our panel of advisors aim to inform, educate, and provide strategic insights to the changes in the economic, legislative, and financial landscape that affects small business. We aim to guide our viewers to navigate the business challenges that they're going to face through COVID and then beyond that. So let's now meet our panel of industry thought leaders. First up, we have Adam Lyle from O'Brien Palmer. Adam, thanks very much for being here.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Bernard Tuamau from MGA Insurance Brokers. Bernie, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ian. Good afternoon, guys. Looking forward to it.
And we have Lisa Garrido from Enigma HR. Lisa, thank you for being here.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
And we have Rob Skeen from Oasis Property Buyers Agents. Rob, thanks very much.
G'day, Ian, viewers. Thanks for having me.
And my name is Ian McLaughlin, and I'm from Imperium Accounting and Tax. And today I'm going to start with Rob. Rob, mate, I was just wondering, what happened with the property market over the weekend?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Ian. Well, look, it's still tracking fairly well. Numbers are up last Saturday. We had 577 homes going to the gavel, clearance rate of 61%. Also, Sammy G last week asked me to talk about commercial properties and how they're faring at the moment. Unfortunately, you can't find data as readily available as residential auction clearance rates. However, I contacted one of the larger auction houses, commercial auction houses, and they have informed me that the auction clearance rates have fallen to around 40 to 45% clearance rate. So not tracking very well in terms of commercial. And a lot of the new listings that they've got coming up are actually just coming on as private treaty as opposed to going to auctions. Also last week, I called 5 commercial property agencies between the inner west, eastern suburbs, as well as the lower North Shore. And collectively, the directors informed me that 75 to 80% of commercial landlords are receiving rent reductions on their properties. That's absolutely staggering, guys, and quite alarming numbers. More advice this week: if you're going to invest in commercial properties, look for blue chip investments, things like banks, supermarkets, childcare centres, medical practices, things that are essential services. That's my tip for the week, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, Rob. That's great. Now, Adam, based on what Rob said in commercial properties and businesses, what should business owners be aware of in regards to that?
Well, certainly the first thing that they should be doing is securing their own positions. Ian, they should be having, if they haven't already, some very carefully constructed conversations with their landlords. And if they are obviously property owners and they are commercial property owners, they should be having some careful discussions with their tenants. And I've only this morning had a meeting with a gentleman who's, he's both. He's a landlord and a tenant because he shares the floor space that he has with a bunch of other sub-tenancies. And the interesting thing with that is that whilst we've got the legislation in place to protect commercial leases and obviously residential leases, some landlords are still in that mindset where they just put their head in the sand and just think that's all going to go away. Now, there is legislation in place right now to protect businesses up until 30 September. We don't know yet whether that's going to be extended beyond that date. So all I'm encouraging everyone to do is to lock in some kind of agreement with your landlord. Now, those agreements can come into all sorts of forms. They can be deeds, they can be an agreed moratorium, it can be an agreed extension of the existing lease. And in some instances where we've been involved with negotiating loans for the amount of the deferred rent in favour of the landlord, so that the landlord ultimately at the end of the day gets some kind of priority or some kind of security for their positions. It's far better for everyone to do that than in the scenario that Rob's just highlighted, is that you're going to have vacancy rates massively increase, particularly in the CBD areas of each of the capital cities of Australia. In Sydney alone, the vacancy rates, from what I can understand, in the commercial property space was already under pressure because of the amount of construction going on with the different, tunnelling going on and the different knockdown rebuilds. And the place looks like, in some blocks, looks like a war zone. But it's only going to get worse in the environment where, if people are going to realise that they can actually very efficiently work from home, and I'm sure Lisa is going to cover some of that later, why do you need to pay premium dollars for floor space in the Sydney CBD? You could, in fact, reduce your floor space considerably. I know from seeing Bernard's office over there on the northern side of the harbour, there's vacancy rates are popping up all over the place there. And in our own building here in Clarence Street in the Sydney CBD, things like that are coming to the fore, and people are realising, hey, I don't really need to have that expense anymore. So my moral of that is just to make sure that they're actually negotiating real outcomes for everybody, because a landlord wants a tenant wants to have some kind of certainty and security around their business. That's how they approach banks to say, hey, I'm going to be okay. This is how the whole world surrounds around comfort and security. Can I just maybe, Ian, just cover off something that I was going to highlight today, and that is the battle that's going on between the health battle and the economic battle. There's two wars going on. And last month, and I think I covered this a couple of weeks ago, there were some very high profile, very well-renowned economists that wrote to the Prime Minister and said, hey, focus on the health battle first, because if we have a second wave, a sustained second wave, we're going to be in a situation where the economic impact of that is going to be profound. Now, the sheer reality is some recent revelations of the amount of the cost of coronavirus worldwide is going to be in the order of somewhere between 25 and 50 trillion dollars. Now, the Australian impact is, as we've been reported, is about 9 times the amount of fiscal stimulus of what Kevin Rudd did with his stimulus package over 10 years ago. Now, to get an economy back on track, you need to actually create stimulus. Now, that can be done fiscally or monetarily. We don't have any more room to really move with monetary policy because the interest rates are already such a low point. So fiscally, we need to stimulate the economy, and that means that potentially we could drive more open. It could end up having huge amounts of bonds and huge amounts of other investments by the government. I think interest rates could drop further. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in time there's been a discussion about dropping interest rates to a point where they're negative, even just to stimulate the economy. But once that happens, once the economy starts to get over the cusp of activity, watch interest rates grow in price, watch taxes grow. So we're going to be in a situation where we're going to need to drag the economy out of a depression, which I've predicted for some time we'll fall into, kicking and screaming, because people are going to say, hang on for a minute, why am I having my taxes increase? Why are the banks now saying, well, I want my money now? And similarly, landlords are going to say, I want my rent paid. So the more secure you have it, the more agreement you have, the more overt you are with those discussions, the better chance you have of surviving. So hopefully that's helped, Ian.
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam. And, there's been 2 significant changes to the new JobKeeper scheme that the government announced. And Lisa, I'll get your thoughts on this afterwards, just from an HR perspective. But just a couple of things that I want to highlight is that, remember, so we're now in the current JobKeeper scheme. And a couple of weeks ago, the government announced the extended scheme. Now they've announced changes to that extended scheme, which is basically relaxing the qualification criteria. So you might remember last week and the week before, I talked about to qualify for the first extension period from the 28th of September to the 3rd of January 2021, businesses needed to show that their actual turnover had fallen in both the June and September quarters, okay? 2020 compared to 2019. Now, they only have to show that it fell in the September quarter. Similarly, for the second extension period that runs from the 4th of January to the 28th of March, they now only need to show a significant downturn, when I'm talking 30%, in the 3 months before December, so the December quarter, rather than the June, September, and December quarters. So there's some serious relaxation of the rules there. Another one really significant change is that when it comes to the workers' eligibility, the deadline has been pushed back so that staff employed at the 1st of July are now going to qualify rather than previously being the 1st of March. So I think there's some really interesting changes there, and they only came out a couple of weeks after the government announced those changes in the first place. So they're already seeing that there's going to be a lot more hurt out there. Something else that I just want to touch on today is the super amnesty. Now, on the 6th of March 2020, the government introduced what we call the super guarantee amnesty. So the amnesty allows employers to disclose and pay previously unpaid super guarantee charge, including normal interest they owe for their employees for quarters starting, get this right, all the way back from the 1st of July 1992, so we're talking Barcelona Olympics, all the way up until 31st of March 2018. So employers who come forward to the ATO and register for the amnesty will be able to get that super as a tax deduction, and they won't incur any interest or penalties. Now, just a couple of notes there, that you have to have registered with the ATO. Okay, so you need to go on and register and basically come forward and say that the super has been unpaid, but we are going to get it paid. Now, if you go into a payment plan, that then won't be deductible. So for the amount to be 100% deductible, it has to be fully paid by the 7th of September. However, if you go into the amnesty, then you're not going to get those interest and penalties. Okay, so it's really well worth doing. So go back and have a look. If there is any unpaid super, all the way back from 1992 to 31st of March 18, now's the time to come forward and get that paid by the government. Get it paid to the government, I should say. So Lisa, over to you, just from an HR perspective. What are your thoughts on this and the super amnesty?
Well, just interestingly enough, I have dealt with a few clients where they had at the time I was working with them, they hadn't paid superannuation, and of course there is a due process for that in terms of declaring that the amount is owed and what your payment options or payment plans would be. This amnesty will definitely, I would say, if employers or businesses are not going to take advantage of this amnesty, they better be very careful once this amnesty is lifted, if it will be, right? Because look, at the end of the day, it is a requirement. It's an HR compliance requirement for businesses to have paid superannuation. I'm more surprised that the employees have not reported that they have not received their superannuation in the funds that are meant to receive them, because it is a requirement that employees actually get their updates from the super funds, as you know. So I'm surprised they haven't been reported yet. And if they haven't, they will be reported, because these are very desperate times and people will take desperate measures to actually recover what is owed to them. And this goes in line with, the JobKeeper payments. If employers are not doing the right thing, and as you know, we've seen some news of late of organizations being fined enormous amounts, or individuals being put to jail because of tax, contraventions, or not paying the right wages, to employees. With JobKeeper, and one of the things that I really wanted to emphasize, it's not going to be my insight for this Monday, but this thing on pandemic policy, right? Because you are still qualified to receive JobKeeper, if you had to be quarantined or had to self-isolate, that JobKeeper payment still has to be paid, right? In a leave of absence or an illness or self-quarantine, which falls under the pandemic policy, JobKeeper still needs to be paid. I get a lot of queries from employers asking, if somebody has had to self-isolate, what do we do with the JobKeeper? You still need to pay that. And it's one of these things that is a subsidy by the government, an allowance given to employers and businesses to be able to survive and go through this process so that their employees can be retained in some shape, way, or form. So that's one important thing that you need to be mindful of. In terms of extensions, I'm going to talk about my insight now. Last week we had a viewer asking about employment and the job market and the panic and frustration that most people are experiencing when they've been stood down, and inevitably they sense that they will be made redundant despite the extension of JobKeeper 2.0. So my insight for today is about that. Contrary to what a lot of people think, yes, there are thousands of unemployed at the moment, but there are also thousands of employment opportunities, right? The fact of the matter is there are still recession-proof sectors. And I spoke about this about 3 weeks ago. I flagged it as IT, life sciences like clinical research, health, allied health, marketing and digital, anyone or any businesses that are doing online or digital content, or marketing and communications. That is industry that is in demand at the moment and is poised for future growth. Accountancy and finance, as you know, Ian, bookkeepers and accountants are more than ever busy at the moment with a lot of the inquiries. HR is one of the recession-proof roles, if you like. And of course, in banking, anything to do with operations and risk management, and Bernard, with you as well, there's still a massive demand for really qualified and highly skilled risk managers in insurance. What we all need to remember, though, that when we are unemployed at the moment, and I've always said this, is that employers are interviewing in a different way at the moment. A lot of interviews or a lot of appointments are being done through remote recruitment and hiring. So the process is a lot shorter to hire someone because you can access individuals quite easily now with the advent of more assertive online and marketing platforms. LinkedIn is a classic example. You can be found, you can be assessed when you apply for a position, you can be found on Facebook or LinkedIn. So it is more than ever important that you are, if you are in the job market, that you need to present yourself as professionally as you possibly can. So if you need assistance with creating your marketing document, which is your resume, this is your sales tool, you need to make sure that that is absolutely spot on, because interviews are not taking as long as they used to be. So get your resume done properly. If you need a professional or assistance to do that, please seek that out. It's worth the investment. Focus on the basics and focus on what you're really good at doing. So what are your core competencies? That is, what is it that you actually can deliver on 100% of the time? What would your referee say about you rather than what you think you are? What would your referee say about you? These are the things that you need to be putting on your resume and making sure that you identify what very clearly, relevantly, and simply on that document. Don't make it an overblown thesis about yourself. It needs to be punchy, very smartly outlined, and relevant for the position you are applying for. So one, look at those recession-proof sectors, get your marketing collateral, which is your resume, done properly, and make sure that you are aware that, because interviews are being done differently now, part of the assessment is how you're conducting yourself in the digital platform. How are you collaborating with them on Zoom? Are you asking questions? Are you engaging? Do you look absolutely professional while you are on this online platform? Are you waffling on as you are talking about yourself, or are you precise? So the assessment is also being done on the digital platform. So often in interviews now, it's not just the one hiring manager. You will have the team collaborating in that interview. So more panel interviews are being conducted. So be prepared for this and don't panic. The skills that you probably would like to be aware of that employers are looking for now, because of the online and remote working. As you said, Adam, more commercial premises are being reduced because more offices are working remotely now. is time management. That's number one. So how do you manage your time when you're working from home? Because it's very difficult to put a demarcation line on what's work hours and what's playtime, if you like. So time management is key. Working well independently is another key skill that employers would be looking for. So talk about this stuff, right? That's if that is your strength to start off with. Self-motivation. As you know, we're working at home, so without disruption or sometimes with kids around us or a family around us, how do you continually self-motivate to get your output high? Organizational skills, self-sufficiency. Because we're working remotely, how often do you have to ring someone to ask for help? Can you work things out yourself? Technology literacy. Are you technologically adept, right? So if you're not, invest in some upskilling on this. Online teaching platforms are more than ever affordable now. So use that. Now, interpersonal skills, it's a classic, I suppose, requirement in most positions. Proactive communication. So you will be asked questions about how you proactively communicate with others. Or particularly if you're in a management role, what are the communication tools that you've initiated in this COVID period? Another skill is managing expectations, proactivity, and of course, consistent communication. So those are some of the key skills that you need to be pitching out there as your core skills, apart from all of the technical skills or abilities that are proven. There is nothing worse for employers to see resumes of overqualified individuals who are desperate. Do not read desperation in your application. It's also as frustrating when we get underqualified professionals applying for positions they have no proven performance in. Employers want the right candidate, the suitable personality and attributes for the role, but they also want to make sure that they're not investing too much in training and upskilling because it's about efficiency. So those are my tips for the week because there was a viewer last week that actually asked and wanted to get some tips on challenges in finding employment. Don't be desperate. There are positions out there, but treat it like a job. Do it consistently, do it at the best of your ability, and don't have this casual attitude about it. And the more you put out there in the right opportunities, you will get some hits. I've got no doubt about that. That's it for me.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Some fantastic advice as always. Let's wrap it up now with Bernie Tuamau from MGA Insurance Brokers. Bernie, what does all this mean for business owners and making sure they're covered from a risk perspective?
Thanks, Ian. Just listening to you guys, in particular you, Lisa. Mate, we're in August, and you know when we started this, and during the pandemic back in March when it first started, who would have thought that would still be sort of sitting here talking about you know the COVID-19. I'm looking at my return to work plan, and I've actually got here marked August 10th that all my staff would be back in the office 5 days a week. But obviously that's not the case, and you know, it's been tough. You know, I've actually gone into business with someone and tried purchasing a business during COVID-19, tried transitioning staff, new staff during COVID-19. I've got staff that are working from home that I haven't even met in person. I've got staff working in Queensland that I haven't met in person. And, you know, although Zoom's been an absolute blessing, you know, we try and pivot during these difficult times. And, you know, hopefully a few months from now, we're still not talking about, I guess, the pandemic, but you know, the good chance is we will be. During the pandemic, there's been a massive uptake of cybercrime, surely largely too. Obviously, businesses still working from home, engaging in platforms such as Zoom and other platforms. Rob, one of your favorites, TikTok. What this means basically is that we're more exposed to things such as data and cybercrime. You know, what this means is there's an insufficient sort of security measures around working from home, using your Wi-Fi. There's an increased risk of people becoming complacent and losing their equipment, including laptops. The support around IT services. Not all small businesses have the capacity and have the professional services to be able to outsource their IT services. So if you've got a business owner who wears multiple hats, who's also the guy that fixes his IT problems. There's no real established safeguards around authenticity methods, and the failure in business assets is quite high during, I guess this pandemic. We've all spoken about different platforms that we're using. This is a time where there's a massive increase in cyber crimes. It's a time when people become complacent. I remember when I started working from home, I was in a suit still. By week 6, I was in my shorts and a singlet, and it's, you got to remind yourself that you are still running a business. Trying to communicate with your different staff and your clients using platforms such as Zoom, and other platforms. You need to make sure that you have a robust insurance program. And this is a very important time that you use advisors such as yourself, such as myself. This is when you get good value for money. When you're sitting down with your insurance advisor, looking for your insurance program, trying to see what insurance policies that you do need in place, what policies that you can get rid of. It's not something that advisors we do encourage, but commercial reality is businesses are doing it tough. And people are looking to cut costs. And unfortunately, sometimes insurance costs is one of those costs that people want to get rid of. So my tip for this week, make sure you have a robust cyber insurance policy in place. Make sure you use your broker and advisor. If you don't have a broker or advisor, feel free to reach out, because this is the time that you should be relying on your insurance advisors or any advisors that you truly do trust. So that's it for me this weekend.
Thanks very much, Bernie. And I could not agree more with everything that you've said. So I'll just go to the panel now. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, Ian, but I do have sort of like a supplementary statement that I'd like to make, that I sort of reinforced the point last week. One of our close colleagues has lost a family member to COVID. And I'd just like to pay respects to those people who are viewing this that have lost a family member. I never thought for a moment that I'd come across someone that I actually knew personally that had lost a family member, and it's happened this week. It brings home the reality to put one of these on, Imagine how you'd feel if you could have prevented it by putting a mask on. So just have a think about that and put it on. And I also would like to pay respects to the terrible tragedy in Beirut. I've got a close contact of mine who's had family members who were unfortunately lost as a result of that. And, the world's a crazy place, and we're living through a pandemic which none of us have really ever lived through before in the world, and it's not going to get any easier. So if we can just have a think about those people today, and if they're in our prayers, and I think that's a nice thing to do, and I'm being quite genuine about that. I hope that they remember the good times with those people that they've lost.
Thanks, Adam, for saying those very kind and thoughtful words. Without distracting from your message, I also wanted to impress upon all our viewers is that despite the fact that employers think that it's an employer market to a certain extent, what they need to remember are the right candidates, the good candidates are looking quite intensely at the right environment, the environments that allow for the sensitivities that are happening at the moment, the environments that are allowing work-life balance. It's no longer as much about the monetary value and monetary reward in the job market. This is about the environments where the leaders have actually adapted and transitioned through the COVID period and have actually thought about their staff's health and safety as utmost priority and not the bottom line dollar. These are the questions candidates are asking about at interview. So you are being interviewed as much as you are interviewing them, but their criteria is no longer necessarily about the job, technical nature of the job, but about the culture that you have created during these very, very challenging times. So for those organizations who have not been sensitive about the needs of and the mental health and well-being of their team members, such as the people that we know, of course, now who have suffered, I think it's just a matter of time when the job market starts picking up, you will lose the right people. and they will find the right home. So that's just a tip. Be very careful, be very mindful of what's going on. Yes, there's an economic necessity, but this is now about the cultural nuances, you know, the value and your ethics as a business. And that's all I really need to say about, I suppose, to piggyback off what Adam just said.
Yeah, thanks very much, Lisa. Really well said as well. And you too, Adam. Guys, we might leave it there today. So I'd like to thank our panel, Bernard Tuamau, Rob Skeen, Adam Lyle, and Lisa Garrido. And also I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Cheers, Ian. Thanks, mate.
Bye.
Thanks.
See ya.